The gunshot that shattered the winter silence sent Sarah Everly tumbling from her horse into a snowbank 3 feet deep, and she knew with terrifying certainty that her husband's brothers had finally caught up with her. She scrambled to her feet, her dark hair whipping across her face as she searched desperately for shelter in the blinding Montana snowstorm. The landscape stretched endlessly white in every direction, except for a dark shape in the distance that might have been a building or might have been nothing more than her freezing mind playing tricks on her. Another shot rang out, closer this time, and Sarah ran. Her boots sank into the snow with each step, her lungs burning from the frigid air. The dark shape grew larger, resolving itself into a barn and a small ranch house barely visible through the heavy snowfall. She could hear hoofbeats behind her now, muffled by the snow but gaining ground. Sarah's fingers were numb inside her thin gloves, her traveling dress soaked through and heavy. She had been running for 3 days, ever since she discovered what her late husband's family really wanted from her, and she had nothing left. The barn door stood partially open, and Sarah threw herself inside, gasping for breath. The warmth hit her first, then the smell of horses and hay. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to control her breathing, trying to think. The hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped. Voices called out, harsh and angry, but the wind carried away most of their words. The barn door suddenly swung wide, and Sarah bit back a scream. But it was not her pursuers who entered. Instead, a tall man in a heavy coat stepped inside, his rifle held ready but pointed at the ground. Snow covered his dark hair and the stubble on his jaw. His eyes were gray, she noticed, gray as the storm clouds overhead. He looked at her for a long moment, taking in her sodden dress, her terrified face, her empty hands. "There are men with guns looking for someone," he said quietly. His voice was deep, careful. "Would that be you?" Sarah's throat felt frozen shut. She managed a small nod. "Are you a danger to me or mine?" he asked. She shook her head violently. "No, I swear I am not. I just need somewhere to hide just for a little while until they leave." The man studied her face, and Sarah tried not to flinch under his gaze. Finally, he gestured toward a ladder leading up to the hayloft. "Get up there. Cover yourself completely. Do not make a sound." Sarah did not wait to be told twice. She climbed the ladder as quickly as her frozen hands would allow and burrowed deep into the hay. Moments later, she heard the barn door open again, and different voices filled the space. "Afternoon," said the rancher, his tone neutral. "We are looking for a woman," came a voice Sarah recognized with a chill. Dale Everly, her dead husband's oldest brother. Dark hair, wearing a green traveling dress. "She is dangerous, possibly armed. Have you seen her?" "Have not seen anyone," the rancher replied. "Been inside most of the day." "This storm came up sudden. You mind if we look around?" Another voice, Marcus Everly, younger but meaner. "I mind," the rancher said, and Sarah heard the shift in his tone. "This is my property. You have no authority here unless you are wearing a badge, and I do not see any badges." "Now listen here," Marcus started. "No, you listen," the rancher cut him off. "This storm is getting worse. You best head back to town before the pass closes completely. I have seen men freeze to death in weather like this. It is not a pretty way to go." There was a long silence. Sarah held her breath, not daring to move despite the hay prickling against her skin. "If you see her," Dale finally said, "there is a reward, $500. "I will keep that in mind," the rancher said. "Now get off my land." Sarah heard the barn door close, then the sound of horses moving away. She stayed perfectly still, counting her heartbeats, until the rancher's voice called up to her. "They are gone. You can come down." She climbed down the ladder on shaking legs. The rancher had moved to the door and was watching through a gap in the wood. They are heading back toward Rhyolite, he said. But this storm is going to strand them before they make it to town, which means they will be back. I am sorry, Sarah whispered. I did not mean to bring trouble to your door. He turned to look at her, and she saw no anger in his face, only a kind of tired resignation. Too late for that. Come on. Let us get you inside before you freeze. The ranch house was small but solid, built to withstand the harsh Montana winters. The rancher led her to the fireplace and gestured for her to sit. He added logs to the fire without speaking, then disappeared into what she assumed was a bedroom. He returned with a blanket and a set of clothes. These belong to my mother, he said, handing them to her. They will be too big, but they are dry. You can change in there. He pointed to the bedroom. I will make coffee. Sarah took the clothes with trembling hands. Thank you, I do not even know your name. Yates Keller, Sarah Everly, though I suppose you already knew that last part. I figured. He moved to the small kitchen area. Those men are your family, my late husband's brothers. Sarah clutched the clothes to her chest. It is complicated. Most things worth running from are. She changed in the bedroom, her fingers struggling with the buttons. The clothes smelled faintly of lavender and cedar, like they had been packed away carefully for a long time. When she emerged, Yates was setting 2 tin cups of coffee on the rough wooden table. He had removed his coat, revealing a simple work shirt and suspenders. He was younger than she had first thought, probably not much past 30. Sit, he said. Drink. Then you can tell me what kind of trouble I have gotten myself into. Sarah wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into her frozen fingers. The coffee was strong and bitter, and she drank it gratefully. Yates sat across from her, waiting. My husband died 6 weeks ago, she began. Robert Everly. We were married for 8 months. He was not a good man, but I did not realize how not good until after the wedding. She took another sip of coffee. He had debts, gambling debts mostly. When he died, his brothers told me that I was responsible for paying them back, but I had no money. My father lost everything before he died, which is why I married Robert in the first place. So you ran, Yates said. So I ran, Sarah agreed. But then I found out the real reason they wanted me to stay. Robert had taken out a life insurance policy, and as his widow, I was the beneficiary, $3,000. They wanted me to sign it over to them. Yates let out a low whistle. $3,000 is a lot of money. They said it was owed to them for taking care of Robert's debts, but I knew if I signed it over, they would kill me. There would be nothing stopping them. Sarah's voice shook. Dale as much as said so when he thought I was asleep one night. He told Marcus that once they had the money, I would have an accident. So you are not just running from the money, Yates said quietly. You are running for your life. Yes. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Yates stood and moved to look out at the storm. This is going to last a while. Could be days before the pass clears. You are stuck here, and so are they, wherever they ended up. I can leave, Sarah said quickly. I will not put you in danger. You will die out there in this storm, Yates said flatly. He turned to face her. And those men will come back here looking for you once the weather clears, so we might as well figure out what to do about it. He paused. You said there was a life insurance policy. Do you have the papers? Sarah nodded. In my saddlebag, which is probably buried in snow somewhere between here and the road. We will look for it when the storm passes. If you have those papers, you have leverage. How? Because as long as you have not signed them over, they need you alive. Dead, you are worth nothing to them. The money would go to the next of kin, which I assume is not them. Sarah had not thought of it that way. My cousin in San Francisco. She is the only family I have left. Then we need to make sure those papers stay in your possession, and we need to get word to the law about what is happening. Yates moved back to the table. The sheriff in Rhyolite is a decent man, but he will need proof of their intentions. How can I prove what Dale said when he thought I was asleep? You probably cannot. But we can prove that they are pursuing you with guns drawn, which is assault at the very least. And if we can get a telegram to San Francisco to your cousin, we can have a witness to the insurance policy and your intentions. Sarah felt a tiny spark of hope. You would help me, even though you do not know me. Yates was quiet for a moment. My mother left this ranch to me when she died, he finally said. But first she had to fight my father for it in court, because he claimed that, as his wife, she had no right to property. She won eventually, but it nearly broke her. She died a year later, and I have always wondered if the fight took too much out of her. He met Sarah's eyes. I do not much care for men who use the law to steal from women, or who threaten them with guns. Your mother sounds like she was a strong woman. She was. Yates stood. You can have the bedroom. I will sleep out here by the fire. We will see what the morning brings. But morning brought only more snow, the storm showing no signs of letting up. Yates went out to tend to the animals, and Sarah found herself alone in the small house. She explored tentatively, noting the spare but well-maintained furnishings, the books on the shelf by the window, the dishes washed and neatly stacked. It was the home of a man who lived alone but had not given up on order and cleanliness. When Yates returned, stamping snow from his boots, Sarah had breakfast waiting. It was simple, just eggs and bread, but she had found the ingredients and done her best. You did not have to do that, Yates said, but he looked pleased. I do not plan to be useless while I am here, Sarah replied. You are risking a lot for me. The least I can do is cook. They ate in comfortable silence. Afterward, Yates showed her around the house, explaining where things were kept, how the stove worked, where the well was located. If something happens to me, he said, you need to know how to survive out here. Nothing is going to happen to you, Sarah said firmly. Probably not, Yates agreed, but probably is not the same as certainly. The storm continued for 3 days. During that time, Sarah and Yates fell into a routine. He handled the outdoor work, tending to the horses and the small herd of cattle he kept close to the barn during winter. She managed the house, cooking meals and mending a tear she found in one of his shirts. They talked in the evenings, sharing stories of their pasts. Sarah learned that Yates had grown up on this ranch, that his father had left when he was 16, and that he had been running the place alone for the past 12 years. He had been engaged once to a girl from town, but she had decided she wanted city life and left for Denver. He had never gone after her. Did you love her? Sarah asked. I thought I did, Yates said. But looking back, I think I just loved the idea of not being alone. There is a difference. Sarah told him about her own past, about growing up in Philadelphia, about her father's slow descent into poverty and drink, about the desperate choice to marry Robert Everly, a man she barely knew who promised security. Did he hurt you? Yates asked quietly. Not with his fists, Sarah said. But there are other ways to hurt someone. He was cruel with his words, and he was unfaithful from the start. I think he only married me because his family pushed him to, hoping marriage would settle him down. It did not. I am sorry. I am not, Sarah said, surprising herself with the honesty. I am sorry he is dead because no one deserves that, but I am not sorry the marriage is over. Is that terrible? No, Yates said. That is human. On the 4th morning, Sarah woke to silence. The wind had stopped. She went to the window and saw that the storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Everything was white and clean and impossibly bright under the winter sun. Yates was already up, drinking coffee in the kitchen. We should look for your horse and your saddlebag, he said. If we can find them. They bundled up and set out, following the path Sarah had taken 4 days earlier. The snow was deep, and they moved slowly, Yates leading the way and breaking trail. After an hour of searching, they found Sarah's horse sheltering in a copse of trees, still saddled and looking miserable but alive. "Well, you are a tough one," Yates said, approaching the animal slowly. He got the horse calm and retrieved the saddlebag. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were the insurance papers. "Got them," he said, handing the bundle to Sarah. She held the papers like they were made of gold. "What now?" "Now we go into town and talk to the sheriff." But as they made their way back to the ranch, they saw riders approaching. 3 of them, moving slowly through the deep snow. Sarah recognized Dale and Marcus immediately. The third man she did not know. "Get behind me," Yates said quietly. He had brought his rifle. The riders stopped about 20 feet away. Dale raised a hand in greeting. "Morning," he called out. "Looks like the storm finally broke." "It did," Yates agreed. He did not lower his rifle. "We are still looking for my sister-in-law," Dale continued. "You sure you have not seen her?" "I have seen her," Yates said calmly. "She is standing right behind me." Dale's face hardened. "Then you will hand her over." "No, I will not." Marcus moved his hand toward his gun, but Yates shifted the rifle slightly, and the movement was enough to make Marcus freeze. "Now let us all stay calm," Dale said. "This does not concern you, friend. This is family business." "Family business that involves guns and threats is not family business," Yates replied. "It is criminal business, and Mrs. Everly has made it clear she does not wish to go with you." "Mrs. Everly has responsibilities," Dale said. "Debts that need to be paid." "Debts that were her husband's, not hers," Yates countered. "And I believe the law would agree with me on that point." "The law is not here," Marcus said with a nasty smile. "But I am," said a new voice. Another rider appeared, this one wearing a star. Sheriff Tom Wade was a gray-haired man with a weathered face and sharp eyes. "And I have been following these 3 gentlemen since they rode out of Rhyolite 4 days ago, asking questions about a woman they claimed was dangerous." He looked at Sarah. "You do not look very dangerous to me, madam." "She is not," Yates said. Sheriff Wade rode closer, his hand resting casually on his own gun. "So why do not you tell me what is really going on here?" Dale started to speak, but Sarah cut him off. "My name is Sarah Everly. My husband Robert died 6 weeks ago. His brothers want me to sign over a life insurance policy to them, and they threatened to kill me if I did not comply. I ran, and they have been chasing me ever since." The sheriff looked at Dale and Marcus. "That true?" "She is lying," Dale said quickly. "We just want what is owed to us." "Robert had debts. And did those debts make you threaten her life?" the sheriff asked. "We never did such a thing." "I heard you," Sarah said. 4 nights before I ran. You and Marcus were drinking in the parlor. You said that once I signed over the money, you would arrange an accident. You said it would be easy." "You cannot prove that," Marcus snarled. "Maybe not," the sheriff said. "But I can prove that you 3 rode out into a blizzard with guns drawn, hunting for a woman who clearly wanted nothing to do with you. I can prove that you just threatened an armed man on his own property. And I can certainly take you all back to town and send a telegram to the authorities in whatever town you came from to see if there are any other complaints against you." He smiled, but it was not friendly. "So here is what is going to happen. You 3 are going to ride back to Rhyolite with me. You are going to stay at the hotel, nice and peaceful like. And Mrs. Everly here is going to stay exactly where she is until she decides what she wants to do. If you come back out here, I will throw you in jail. Are we clear?" Dale looked like he wanted to argue, but the sheriff's hand had not moved from his gun. Finally, he nodded stiffly. "Clear. Good, let us go." The sheriff herded Dale, Marcus, and the third man back toward town. Before he left, he tipped his hat to Sarah and Yates. I will need a statement from both of you, he said. Come into town when you are ready, but take your time. They watched the riders disappear into the distance. Sarah felt her legs go weak and she sat down in the snow. Are you all right? Yates asked, crouching beside her. I think so. I just need a moment. He waited patiently until she was ready to stand. They walked back to the ranch in silence, leading Sarah's horse. Once inside, Sarah finally allowed herself to cry, all the fear and tension of the past weeks pouring out. Yates made her tea and sat with her, not saying anything, just being present. When she finally stopped crying, Sarah felt exhausted but lighter. Thank you, she said, for everything, for hiding me, for standing up to them, for not turning me away. You do not have to thank me, Yates said. Yes, I do. Most men would have handed me over for that reward money. I am not most men. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his face. No, you are not. They went into town the next day and gave their statements to Sheriff Wade. He told them that he had sent telegrams to Philadelphia, where the Everlies were from, and had received some interesting responses. Turns out Dale and Marcus Everly have a history of questionable business dealings, the sheriff said. Nothing that stuck in court, but enough complaints that the authorities back there were very interested to hear about this situation. I have advised them to leave Montana as soon as the passes clear fully. If they refuse, I will arrest them for assault and let the courts sort it out. Will they leave? Sarah asked. I believe so. They are bullies, not fighters. Without the element of surprise, they have no power over you. Sarah felt another weight lift from her shoulders. What about the insurance policy? That is yours to do with as you please. I suggest you find a lawyer and get everything properly documented, just to be safe. They found a lawyer in Rhyolite, a competent woman named Mrs. Fletcher who had practiced in Chicago before moving west with her husband. She reviewed the papers and confirmed that Sarah was the sole beneficiary and that the Everly brothers had no legal claim to the money. If you want my advice, Mrs. Fletcher said, I would cash this policy as soon as possible and put the money somewhere safe. Maybe not in Rhyolite if those men are still around. Do you have family elsewhere? A cousin in San Francisco, Sarah said. Then I would recommend you travel there once the weather permits and handle the financial matters from there. In the meantime, I can draw up papers that will protect your interests. Sarah agreed, and Mrs. Fletcher set to work. As they left the lawyer's office, Yates asked, So you will be leaving for San Francisco? Eventually, Sarah said, but not immediately. The passes will not be clear for weeks yet. She looked at him. If it is all right with you, I would like to stay at the ranch a while longer. I can pay you once the insurance money comes through. You do not have to pay me, Yates said. I want to, Sarah insisted. You have done so much for me already, Sarah. Yates stopped walking and turned to face her. You do not owe me anything, and you are welcome to stay as long as you want, not because of money, but because I want you there. Something in his voice made Sarah's heart skip. You do? Yes, he said simply. I do. They walked back to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the snow pink and gold. Sarah found herself very aware of Yates beside her, of the way his breath puffed white in the cold air, of the way he kept glancing at her when he thought she was not looking. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Yates said, Tell me about San Francisco. Have you been there before? Once, when I was a child. My cousin Emily lives there with her husband. They have a shop, selling fabrics and notions. She has been asking me to visit for years. Sounds like a good place to make a fresh start. It does, Sarah agreed. But the thought of leaving Montana, of leaving this ranch and the quiet life she had found here, filled her with unexpected sadness. Unless, Yates said carefully, you wanted to make a fresh start somewhere else. Sarah's pulse quickened. Where did you have in mind? Here, Yates said. He was looking at the fire, not at her. "I know it has only been a week. I know you have been through a terrible ordeal and you probably need time to figure out what you want, but I need to say this before I lose my nerve. I like having you here, Sarah. I like waking up and hearing you moving around the house. I like talking to you in the evenings. I like that you mended my shirt without being asked and that you laugh at my terrible jokes. And I know it is too soon and probably foolish, but I would very much like it if you would consider staying, not just until spring, but beyond that, if you wanted to." Sarah's throat felt tight. "Yates, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now," he said quickly. "Just think about it. That is all I am asking." "I do not need to think about it," Sarah said quietly. Yates finally looked at her, and she saw hope and fear warring in his expression. "I like being here too. I like who I am when I am here. With you, I do not feel like the fool who married the wrong man or the burden who has to be taken care of. I feel like myself, maybe for the first time in my life." "So you will stay?" Yates asked. "If you are sure that is what you want, I am sure." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused. "I am very sure." Sarah squeezed his fingers. "Then yes, I will stay." Winter slowly gave way to early spring, and Sarah settled into life at the ranch. She proved to be a quick learner, mastering the wood stove and the garden planning, learning to handle the horses and even help with the cattle when needed. Yates taught her to shoot, setting up targets behind the barn and patiently correcting her stance until she could hit a can at 20 paces. "Why do I need to know this?" Sarah asked one afternoon, her ears ringing from the gunfire. "Because this is wild country," Yates said, "and I will not always be around. I need to know you can protect yourself if you have to." "From what?" Dale and Marcus left weeks ago. "From whatever might come. Bears, wolves, men with bad intentions. The world is not always kind, especially to women alone." "But I am not alone," Sarah said. "I have you." Yates smiled, and Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. "Yes, you do, but humor me anyway." The insurance money came through in late March, and Sarah made the trip into Rhyolite to collect it. Mrs. Fletcher had arranged everything through a bank in Denver, and Sarah now had $3,000 to her name. It was more money than she had ever imagined possessing. "What will you do with it?" Yates asked that evening. Sarah had been thinking about this for weeks. "I want to invest some of it in the ranch," she said. "If you will let me, we could expand the herd, maybe add some chickens for eggs, and the barn roof needs repair." "Sarah, this is your money. You should not spend it on my property." "It is not just your property anymore," Sarah said. "It is our property, at least I hope it is." Yates set down his coffee cup. "What are you saying?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I am saying that I love you, Yates Keller. I have loved you since the day you stood between me and those men with your rifle. But I think I started falling for you the moment you told me to hide in the hay and did not ask for anything in return. I am saying that I do not want to just stay here for a while. I want to stay here forever. If you will have me." Yates was across the room in 3 strides. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you too," Yates said. "I think I have since the day you came down from that hayloft looking fierce and terrified and determined all at once. Marry me, Sarah. Not because you need protection or because you need a home, but because you want to, because you want me." "Yes," Sarah said, kissing him again. "Yes to all of it." They were married in Rhyolite on the first day of April, with Sheriff Wade and Mrs. Fletcher as witnesses. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Fletcher helped her pick out from the general store, and Yates wore his one good suit, brushed clean and pressed. The ceremony was brief, conducted by a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through town. But Sarah had never felt anything more profound than the moment Yates slipped a gold band onto her finger. "I promise to cherish you," Yates said, his voice thick with emotion. "To protect you and stand beside you for as long as we both shall live." "I promise to love you," Sarah replied. "To build a life with you, to face whatever comes together." They kissed as husband and wife, and Sarah felt like she was finally, truly home. The spring turned into summer, and the ranch thrived under their combined efforts. They used some of Sarah's money to buy more cattle and to hire a hand to help with the work, a young man named Tom who had just come west from Ohio and was grateful for steady employment. Sarah planted a vegetable garden that flourished in the Montana sun, and she learned to can and preserve food for the winter. In the evenings, after the work was done, Sarah and Yates would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. Yates would play a battered harmonica he had owned since childhood, and Sarah would sing along softly. They talked about everything and nothing, making plans for the future, sharing dreams. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked one night in late July. "Taking me in like you did?" "Your life was simpler before I came along." "My life was empty before you came along," Yates said. "Simple is not the same as good. You make everything better, Sarah, every single thing." "Even when I burn the biscuits, especially when you burn the biscuits," Yates said with a grin. "Because then I get to tease you about it and you get that adorable stubborn look on your face." Sarah swatted his arm playfully. "I do not have a stubborn look." "You absolutely do. You are making it right now." She tried to school her expression into something more neutral, but Yates just laughed and pulled her close. "I love you, stubborn look and all." "I love you too," Sarah said, resting her head on his shoulder. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." In September, Sarah realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure before saying anything to Yates, but by October there was no doubt. She was pregnant. She told him on a crisp autumn evening after he came in from checking on the herd. "I have news," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Good news or bad news?" Yates asked, hanging up his coat. "Good news. At least, I hope you will think it is good news." Sarah took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Yates stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the widest smile Sarah had ever seen. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing. "A baby! We are having a baby!" "Careful," Sarah said, but she was laughing too. "You are going to make me dizzy." He set her down gently, then immediately looked worried. "Did I hurt you? Should you be sitting down? What do you need?" "I need you to stop fussing," Sarah said fondly. "I am pregnant, not made of glass." But Yates did fuss and continued to fuss throughout the pregnancy. He insisted Sarah rest more, do less heavy work. He rode into town and came back with a book about pregnancy and childbirth that he read cover to cover. He built a cradle out of smooth pine wood, sanding it until there was not a single rough spot that might scratch a baby's delicate skin. Sarah found his concern endearing, even when it became a bit overwhelming. Mrs. Fletcher, who had become a good friend, came out to the ranch regularly to check on Sarah and give her advice. "He is driving me a little mad," Sarah confessed one afternoon while Yates was out in the barn. "He barely lets me carry a bucket of water anymore." "He is scared," Mrs. Fletcher said gently. "Childbirth is dangerous and he knows it. He lost his mother young. He does not want to lose you too." Sarah had not thought about it that way. That evening she sat Yates down and took his hands. "I know you are worried," she said, "but I am strong, and Mrs. Fletcher will be here to help when the time comes. Everything is going to be fine." "You cannot promise that," Yates said quietly. "No, I cannot, but I can promise that I will fight with everything I have to come back to you. Because I love you and I love this baby and I have no intention of leaving either of you." Yates pulled her close, and Sarah felt him shaking slightly. "I am terrified," he admitted. "I have never been this happy, and I am terrified of losing it." "So am I," Sarah said. "But we cannot live in fear. We just have to trust that we will face whatever comes together." Winter came again, Sarah's belly growing round as the snow piled up outside. This winter was different from the last. The house was warm with love and anticipation instead of fear. They spent the long evenings preparing for the baby, washing tiny clothes that Mrs. Fletcher had given them, discussing names. "If it is a boy, I want to name him after my father," Yates said. "William." "William Keller," Sarah said, trying it out. "I like it. And if it is a girl, you pick." Sarah thought about it. "Rose, for new beginnings." The baby came on a cold February night 3 weeks before Sarah had expected. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Sarah thought she might not make it through. But Mrs. Fletcher was there, calm and competent, and Yates held Sarah's hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, just as dawn was breaking, it was a boy. A healthy, loud, perfect boy. "William," Yates said, his voice choked with tears as he held his son for the first time. "His name is William." Sarah watched her husband cradle their baby, and she felt a completeness she had never known existed. Everything she had been through, all the pain and fear and running, had led her here. To this man, this home, this family. "He is beautiful," Sarah whispered. "He is perfect," Yates agreed. "You are both perfect." The months that followed were exhausting but joyful. William was a good baby, healthy and curious. Sarah recovered from the birth stronger than before, and she threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she had brought to learning ranch life. Yates was a devoted father, walking the floor with William when he cried at night, making silly faces to earn baby smiles, singing off-key lullabies. Tom, their hired hand, proved invaluable during this time, taking on extra work so that Yates could spend more time with his family. In return, Yates raised his wages and gave him a share of the profits from the cattle sales. Tom was grateful and loyal, and Sarah was glad to have him around. He was like a younger brother, eager and hardworking. By the time spring arrived again, William was 4 months old and starting to interact with the world around him. Sarah would take him outside in the afternoons, letting him feel the warm sun on his face and hear the sounds of the ranch. Yates had built a special carrier that Sarah could wear on her back, leaving her hands free to work in the garden while William watched everything with wide eyes. One afternoon in May, a year and a half after Sarah had first arrived at the ranch, they were all outside. Yates was mending a fence while Sarah weeded the garden with William on her back. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and Sarah felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. "I have been thinking," Yates said, coming over to where Sarah knelt in the dirt. "This ranch is doing well. Better than it has in years. And that is because of you, because of your ideas and your hard work and your money, yes, but mostly because of you." "We are doing well because of both of us," Sarah said. "My point is," Yates continued, "I want to make sure everything is legally protected. I want to add your name to the deed, make it official that this ranch belongs to both of us." Sarah sat back on her heels, surprised. "You do not have to do that." "I want to. My mother fought for the right to own property, and I want to honor that by making sure you have the same right. This is your home, Sarah. It should be your property too." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. They went into Rhyolite the following week and had Mrs. Fletcher draw up the papers. The ranch was now officially owned by both Yates and Sarah Keller in equal partnership. Sarah felt a fierce pride looking at her name on the deed. "Your mother would be proud of you," she told Yates as they rode back to the ranch. "I think she would be proud of both of us," Yates said. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work and love. William grew into a bright, energetic toddler, then a curious child. When he was 3, Sarah became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when their daughter was born on a warm August evening, Sarah felt only joy and relief. They named her Rose, as Sarah had wanted years before. She had Yates's gray eyes and Sarah's dark hair, and from the beginning she had a calm, observant nature that was completely different from William's boundless energy. "She is studying us," Yates said one evening, watching as baby Rose tracked movements with her eyes. "Figuring out how everything works." "She gets that from you," Sarah said. "She gets the good stuff from both of us," Yates replied, kissing Sarah's forehead. With 2 children, the ranch became louder and messier and infinitely more complicated. But Sarah would not have changed it for anything. She loved the chaos of family dinners, the sound of William's laughter as Yates chased him around the yard, the weight of Rose sleeping on her chest. Tom eventually married a girl from town, a practical young woman named Lucy who fit into their extended ranch family perfectly. They built a small house on the far end of the property, and Lucy became Sarah's closest friend. Together they managed the household and the children while the men worked the ranch. When William was 5 and Rose was 2, Sarah found herself pregnant once more. This baby was unexpected but welcomed. Their second son was born in March, during a late spring snowstorm that reminded Sarah of the day she had first arrived at the ranch. "We should name him Storm," Yates joked, but they chose Benjamin instead after Sarah's father. 3 children kept them busy from dawn to well past dark. The house was never quiet, never clean for more than a few minutes. But it was full of love and laughter, and Sarah could not imagine wanting anything different. She thought sometimes about the woman she had been when she first stumbled into Yates's barn, desperate and afraid. That woman seemed like a stranger now. Sarah had become strong in ways she never thought possible. She could shoot, ride, deliver a calf, and keep a household running smoothly. She was a mother, a wife, a rancher. She was home. One evening, when Benjamin was 6 months old and finally sleeping through the night, Sarah and Yates sat on the porch after putting all 3 children to bed. It was one of the rare moments of peace in their busy lives. "You remember the first night I stayed here?" Sarah asked. "When you gave me your mother's clothes and made me coffee." "I remember," Yates said. "I thought you were the bravest person I had ever met. You had just been shot at and chased through a blizzard, and you still had the courage to look me in the eye and tell me you were not dangerous." "I was terrified," Sarah admitted. "So was I," Yates said. "Not of you, but of what would happen if I helped you. I knew those men would come back. I knew there would be trouble. But I looked at you standing there in that barn, shaking from cold and fear, and I knew I could not turn you away. I did not know then that I was making the best decision of my life." Sarah leaned against him. "I did not know I was going to fall in love with you. I thought I would stay a few days, maybe a week, and then move on. I never imagined this. A home, a family, a whole life. Are you glad you stayed?" Yates asked. "Every single day," Sarah said. "Even the hard days, even when William breaks something or Rose will not stop crying or I am so tired I can barely stand. I am glad for all of it because it means I am here with you." "I love you," Yates said. "More now than I did the day we married, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," Sarah replied. "You saved me, you know, not just from Dale and Marcus, but from a life that was slowly killing me. You gave me a chance to become who I was meant to be." "You saved yourself," Yates said. "I just gave you a place to land." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the Montana mountains. Inside the house, they could hear Benjamin start to fuss, then settle again. Sarah smiled, knowing that Lucy was probably checking on him, or maybe William had woken up and was singing his baby brother back to sleep like he sometimes did. "We should probably go inside," Sarah said. "It is getting cold." "5 more minutes," Yates said. "I want to remember this. Right now, this moment. Everything perfect and peaceful." So they sat for 5 more minutes and then 10, holding hands and counting stars. And when they finally went inside, when they checked on their sleeping children and banked the fire and climbed into bed together, Sarah felt grateful for every step that had brought her to this place. The years continued to roll forward, each one bringing new challenges and joys. William grew tall and serious, showing an aptitude for working with the animals. Rose was quieter but no less determined, with a talent for numbers that Sarah encouraged by teaching her to keep the ranch accounts. Benjamin was the charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble with a smile. When Sarah was 35 and Yates was 38, they decided their family was complete. 3 children felt right, felt like exactly what they were meant to have. The ranch was prosperous now, one of the most successful in the region. They had expanded the herd considerably and had built a new barn and added rooms to the house. Tom and Lucy had children of their own, 3 daughters who played with William, Rose, and Benjamin. The ranch felt less like a business and more like a small community, everyone working together and looking out for each other. Sarah kept in touch with her cousin Emily in San Francisco through letters. Emily had visited once when Rose was a baby, and she had been amazed at the life Sarah had built. "I always knew you were stronger than you thought," Emily had said, "but I never imagined you would become a rancher in Montana." "Neither did I," Sarah admitted, "but this is where I belong." Sheriff Wade remained a good friend over the years, stopping by the ranch periodically to check in and share news from town. He told them once that Dale and Marcus Everly had been arrested in California for trying to swindle a widow out of her property. They were both in prison now. "I am not sorry," Sarah said when she heard the news. "They made their choices. You did too," the sheriff said, "and yours turned out better." When William turned 18, he announced he wanted to expand into horse breeding. Sarah and Yates talked it over and decided to give him a portion of land to start his own operation, still part of the ranch but his to manage. William threw himself into the work with enthusiasm, and within a year, he had established a reputation for training quality horses. Rose, at 15, was already keeping the books for the entire ranch operation. She had a sharp mind for business and had suggested several improvements that had saved them money. Sarah knew Rose would probably eventually want more than ranch life could offer, and she encouraged her daughter to dream big. "You can do anything," Sarah told her. "Anything at all. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." "I know, Mama," Rose said. "You taught me that." Benjamin, at 12, was still figuring out his place. He loved the ranch but also loved stories and books. Sarah had taught him to read when he was 4, and he had been insatiable ever since. She suspected he might become a writer or a teacher someday, something beyond ranching, and that was fine. She wanted her children to be happy, whatever that meant for them. On a summer evening when Sarah was 40, she and Yates took a rare trip into town alone. The children were old enough to manage for a night, and Tom and Lucy were there if anything went wrong. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, a luxury they rarely indulged in. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Yates asked over dessert. Sarah thought about it. "No," she said honestly. "That life was never really mine. It was my father's, and then it was supposed to be Robert's. But this life, this ranch, our family, that is all mine, ours. We built it together." "We did," Yates agreed, "and I would not change a single thing." "Not even the time Benjamin tried to ride the bull and broke his arm?" Sarah asked with a smile. "Well, maybe that one thing," Yates conceded. but everything else, exactly as it happened. They walked back to the ranch under a full moon, taking the long way and holding hands like they were courting teenagers instead of a married couple of 15 years. When they reached the top of the ridge overlooking their land, they stopped to look. The ranch spread out below them, the house with its warm lights, the barn Yates had built, the pastures where their cattle grazed. Beyond that, Tom and Lucy's house, and the section where William was starting his horse operation. It was more than Sarah had ever dreamed of having. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" Yates asked. "For taking in a desperate woman on a snowy day, for protecting me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Sarah, you do not have to thank me for any of that. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." She turned to face him, reaching up to touch his face. There was gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes, but to Sarah he was as handsome as the day they met. "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life, all of it." He kissed her then, tender and deep, and Sarah felt the same flutter in her stomach she had felt the first time he kissed her all those years ago. "Come on," Yates said. "Let us go home." They walked down the ridge together, toward the lights of the house, toward their children and their life. And Sarah thought about the terrified woman who had fallen into a snowbank 18 years earlier, running from men with guns, with no hope and no plan. That woman could never have imagined this happy ending. But then, Sarah thought, the best endings are the ones you build yourself, one day at a time, with someone you love by your side. The years ahead would bring their own challenges, she knew. Children would grow up and leave, seasons would change, life would continue in its unpredictable way. But Sarah was not afraid. She had learned that she was strong enough to face whatever came. And she would not face it alone. She had Yates, and she had this ranch, and she had the life they had created together. She had come to Montana looking for a place to hide until the snow cleared, and she had found so much more. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself. And when spring had come all those years ago, she had still been by Yates's side. Not because she had to be, but because she wanted to be. Because he was her home just as she was his. They reached the house, and Sarah could hear laughter inside. William's deep voice, Rose's quick wit, Benjamin's enthusiastic storytelling. The sounds of family, of home, of love. Yates opened the door and gestured for her to go first. "After you, Mrs. Keller." Sarah smiled and stepped inside into the warmth and light, into the life she had chosen and the love she had found. Behind her, Yates followed, closing the door against the night. They were home.